read from a paranormal themed book. Sometimes the stories are true, sometimes they're not. But today's topic is true Irish ghost stories. We'll be right back. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good evening, everybody, and happy Sunday to y'all. It's Palm Sunday today, right? Easter's next week. Man, things have gone fast. Weather's changing here in Northern California. Weather is warming up all week. It's been warm. We're supposed to get some rain this coming on Thursday, but other than that, I've been out doing yard work. I've already started my spring yard work and all that stuff. Let me go ahead and get my chat set up over here, and welcome everybody. I am broadcasting on 4 different networks today. I cannot mention them because some of them don't like me mentioning other networks. But welcome. And again, today I will not be doing any psychic readings or anything. This is our relaxed day. This is our kind of cruise into the work week day. Listen to ghost stories. And boy, are they some pretty cool ghost stories. We've been reading this book for about 5 weeks. We're on the 5th week. We may be finishing it today. Maybe. But anyway, my name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour or so. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team, based out of Sacramento, California. We're 5 strong, up and down the state. If you have a paranormal need, get a hold of us. You can find us all over social media. We will help you. It might take us a couple days to get to you because people don't realize how big of a state we are, okay? And once again, for both the other 2 apps that I have, I'm pointing at you right now so you know who you are. Okay? I can't see the comments, so talk with Kathy. Kathy's in. Kathy will comment for me and take care of that part. So every Sunday we try to sit down. I try to find paranormal themed books. Sometimes I might just read through Halloween we read Frankenstein, we read Dracula. So sometimes I'll have themed books like that. But sometimes I'll get a hold of true ghost stories, which is what we've been doing for the past 5 weeks, especially with Ireland. Ireland, I mean, they're just full of ghost stories over there. I was in England for a month once, and man, every place you go, there's a ghost story, over in the UK. So, so it's been very interesting reading this. It should be interesting to see where this next chapter goes. I believe it's chapter 8. I don't do Roman numerals very well. But anyway, just to let you know, gifts over here. If you want to give a gift, that's great. If not, that's fine too. Just all I ask is that you like, follow, and share. Like, follow, and share. Same thing over here. Now, for you guys watching from Book of Face and Tube of You, I do have a ticker at the bottom. So if you would like to donate later, now or later on, that would be great too. We're trying to keep the lights on with everything and just keep us going. Okay. Anyway, remember to like, follow, and share, you guys. Okay, like, follow, and share over here. So we're going to start reading. And remember, last week we had a lot of trouble. I had a ghost come through. I do I do tarot card readings in the evenings, and sometimes they do come through, and they're menaces. And last week we had a menace in here that was causing all kinds of problems. So we started 20 minutes late last week. So we're right on time today. So let's get to reading. We'll see where we end up in an hour. Okay, I'll read you for an hour, and maybe like I said, there's like about 38 to 40 pages to go. So we might finish tonight. We don't know. Okay. So everything looks like it's going to work out. Let me have a sip of water, and away we go tonight. Thank you for the heart me over there. Thank you. Okay, here we go. The book is True Irish Ghost Stories. Chapter VIII. Told you I hate Roman numerals. Okay, the matter in this chapter does not seem, strictly speaking, to come under the head of any of the preceding ones. It contains no account of houses, of places permanently haunted, or of warnings of impending death. Rather, we have gathered up in it a number of tales relative to the appearance of the wraiths of living men, or accounts of visions, strange apparitions, or extraordinary experiences. Some few of these have a purpose, while the majority are strangely aimless and purposeless. Sometimes they're seen or heard, that is all. and no results, good or bad, follow. Okay, quick warning. This book was written in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So for you woke folk, okay, and internet police and all that, try to be nice about it, okay? Because I'm doing my best to read through this stuff. If there's something that might be offensive, I try to read around it. Okay, I try to read around it. So I'm doing my best to do that. Please do not turn me into the internet police. Okay. So here we go. Also, this book is free. You can go find it. It's Gutenberg.org. It's a Gutenberg Project, and they have gone through and done thousands and thousands and thousands of books that are all out of copyright. So you can read them online and stuff, just like I'm doing today. We commence with one, which, however, certainly indicates a purpose which was fulfilled. It is the experience of Mrs. Seymour, wife to one of the compilers. When she was a little girl, she resided in Dublin. Among the members of the family was her paternal grandmother. This old lady was not as kind as she might have been to her granddaughter, and consequently the latter was somewhat afraid of her. In process of time, the grandmother died. Mrs. Seymour, who was then about 8 years old, had to pass the door of the room where the death occurred in order to reach her own bedroom, which was a flight higher up. Past this door, the child used to fly in terror with all possible speed. On one occasion, however, she was preparing to make the usual rush past. She distinctly felt a hand placed on her shoulder, and became conscious of a voice saying, "Don't be afraid, Mary." From that day on, the child never had the least feeling of fear, and always walked quietly past the door. The Reverend D.B. Knox sends a curious personal experience. I'm going to move this a little bit here. Okay. All right, the Reverend D.B. Knox sends a curious personal experience, which was shared by him with 3 other people. He writes as follows. Not very long ago, my wife and I were preparing to retire for the night. A niece, who was in the house, was in her bedroom, and the door was opened. The maid had just gone to her room. All 4 of us distinctly heard the heavy step of a man walking along the corridor, apparently in the direction of the bathroom. We searched the whole house immediately, but no one was discovered. Nothing untoward happened, except the death of the maid's mother about a fortnight later. It was a detached house, so that the noise could not have been made by the neighbors. In the following tale, the double or wraith of a living man was seen by 3 different people, one of whom, our correspondent, saw it through a telescope. She writes, in May 1883, the parish of A blank was vacant, so Mr. D blank, the diocesan curate, used to come out to take service on Sundays. One day, there were 2 funerals to be taken, the one at a graveyard some distance off, the other at A blank churchyard. My brother was at both, the far-off one being taken first. The house was then lived in and looked down towards A blank churchyard, which was about a quarter of a mile away. From an upper window, my sister and I saw 2 surpliced figures going out to meet the coffin, and said, "Why, there's 2 clergy," having supposed that there would be only Mr. D. Okay. I, being short-sighted, used a telescope and saw the two clergy showing between the people. But when my brother returned, he said, "A strange thing's happened. Mr. D and Mr. W, curate of the neighboring parish, took the far-off funeral. I saw them both again at A blank, but when I went into the vestry, I only saw Mr. W. I asked where Mr. D was, and he replied that he had left immediately after the first funeral, as he had to go to Kilkennan, and that he, Mr. W, had come on alone to take the funeral at A." Okay. Here is a curious tale from the city of Limerick, of a lady's double being seen, with no consequent results. It is seen by Mr. Richard Hogan as the personal experience of his sister, Mrs. Mary. It is sent by Richard Hogan as the personal experience of his sister, Mrs. Mary Murnane. On Saturday, October 25th, 1913, at 4:30 in the afternoon, Mr. Hogan left the house in order to purchase some cigarettes. A quarter of an hour afterwards, Mrs. Murnane went down the town to do some business. As she was walking down George Street, she saw a group of 4 persons standing on the pavement, engaged in conversation. They were her brother, a Mrs. O. S., and 2 ladies, a Miss P. O. D., and her sister, Miss M. O. D. She recognized the latter as her face was partly turned towards her, and noted that she was dressed in a knitted coat and light blue hat, while in her left hand she held a bag or purse. The other lady's back was turned towards her, As Mrs. Burnham was in a hurry to get her business done, she determined to pass them by without being noticed. But a number of people coming in the opposite direction blocked the way and compelled her to walk quite close to the group of four. But they were so intent on listening to what one lady was saying that they took no notice of her. The speaker appeared to be Miss M.O.D., and, though Mrs. Murnane did not actually hear her speak as she passed her, yet, from their attitudes, the other three seemed to be listening to what she was saying, and she heard her laugh when right behind her, not the laugh of her sister, P. Blank, and the laugh was repeated after she had left the group a little behind. So far, there was nothing out of the common. When Mrs. Murnane returned to her house about an hour later, she found her brother Richard there before her. She casually mentioned to him how she had passed him and his three companions on the pavement, to which he replied that she was quite correct, except in one point, namely, that there were only three in the group, as Mrs. O.D. was not present, as she had not come to Limerick at all that day. She then described to him the exact position each one of the four occupied, and the clothes worn by them, to all of which facts he assented, except as to the presence of Miss M.O.D. Mrs. Murnane adds that that is all I can say in the matter, but most certainly the fourth person was in that group, as I both saw and heard her. She wore the same clothes I had seen on her previously, with the exception of the hat. But the following Saturday she had on the same colored hat I had seen on her previous Saturday. When I told her about it, she was as much mystified as I was, and am. My brother stated that there was no laugh from any of the three present. Mrs. G. Kelly sent an experience of a wraith, which seems in some mysterious way to have been conjured up in her mind by the description she had heard and then externalized. She writes, about 4 years ago, a musical friend of ours was staying in the house. He and my husband were playing and singing Dvorak's Spectral Bride, a work which he had studied with the composer himself. The music appealed very much to both, and they were excited and enthusiastic over it. Our friend was giving many personal reminiscences of Dvorak and his method of explaining the way he wanted his work to be done. I was sitting by and an interested listener for some time. On getting up at last and going into the drawing room, I was startled and somewhat frightened to find a man standing there in a shadowy part of the room. I saw him distinctly and could describe his appearance accurately. I called out, and the two men ran in. But as the apparition only lasted for a second, they were too late. I described the man who I had seen, whereupon our friend exclaimed, "Why, that was Dvorak himself." At that time I had never seen a picture of Dvorak. But when our friend returned to London, he sent me one which I recognized as the likeness of the man who I had seen in our drawing room. A curious vision, a case of second sight, in which a quite unimportant event, previously unknown, was revealed, is sent by the percipient, who was a lady well known to both the compilers and a lifelong friend of one of them. She says, last summer I sent a cow to the fair of Limerick, a distance of about 13 miles, and the men who took her there the day before the fair left her in a paddock for the night close to Limerick City. I awoke very early the next morning. I was fully awake when I saw, not with my ordinary eyesight, but apparently inside my head, a light, an intensely brilliant light, and in it I saw the back gate being opened by a red-haired woman and the cow I had supposed in the fair walking through the gate. I then knew that the cow must be home, and going to the yard later on, I was met by the wife of the man who was in charge in a great state of excitement. "Oh, law, miss," she exclaimed, "you'll be mad. Didn't Julia," which is a red-haired woman, "find the cow outside the lodge gate as she was going out at 4 o'clock to the milking? That's my tale, perfectly true, and I would give a good deal to be able to control that light, and see more if I could." Okay. Another curious vision was seen by a lady who is also a friend of both the compilers. One night, she was kneeling at her bedside and saying her prayers. Hers was the only one bed in the room, when suddenly she felt a distinct touch on her shoulder. She turned round in the direction of the touch and saw at the end of the room a bed, with a pale, indistinguishable figure laid therein, and what appeared to be a clergyman standing over it. About a week later, she fell into a long and dangerous illness. An account of a dream which implied an extraordinary coincidence. If coincidence it be, and nothing more, was sent as follows by a correspondent, who requested that no names be published. That which I am about to relate has a peculiar interest for me, inasmuch as the central figure in it was my own grandaunt, and moreover the principal witness, if I may use such a term, was my father. At the period during which this strange incident occurred, my father was living with his aunt and some other relatives. One morning, at the breakfast table, my grandaunt announced that she had had a most peculiar dream during the previous night. My father, who was always very interested in that kind of thing, took down in his notebook all the particulars concerning it. They were as follows. My grandaunt dreamed that she was in a cemetery which she recognized as Glasnevin, and as she gazed at the memorials of the dead which lay so thick around, one stood out most conspicuously and caught her eye, for she saw clearly cut on a cold white stone an inscription bearing her own name. Claire S.D. died 14th of March, 1873. Dearly loved and forever mourned. Rest in peace. While to add the peculiarity of it, the date on the stone, as given above, was from the date of her dream, exactly a year in advance. My grandaunt was not very nervous, and soon the dream faded from her mind. Months rolled by, and on one morning at breakfast it was noticed that my grandaunt had not appeared. But, as she was a very religious woman, it was thought that she had gone out to church. However, as she did not appear, my father sent someone to her room to see if she were all right. And as no answer was given to repeated knocking, the door was opened, and my grandaunt was found kneeling at her bedside, unalive. The day of her death was March 14th, 1873, corresponding exactly with the date seen in her dream, a 12-month before. My grandaunt was buried in Glasnevin, and on her tombstone, a white marble slab, was placed the inscription which she had read in her dream. Our correspondent sent us a photograph of the stone and its inscription. The present Archdeacon of Limerick, Venerable J.A. Hayden, LL.D., sends the following experience. In the year 1870, I was rector of the little rural parish of Chapel Russell. One autumn day, the rain fell with a quiet, steady, and hopeless persistence from morning to night. Wearied at length from the gloom, and tired of reading and writing, I determined to walk to the church about half a mile away and pass a half hour playing the harmonium, returning for the lamplight and tea. I wrapped up, put the key of the church in my pocket, and Arriving at the church, I walked up the straight avenue, bordered with graves and tombs on either side, while the soft, steady rain quietly pattered on the trees. When I reached the church door, before putting the key in the lock, moved by some indefinable impulse, I stood on the doorstep, turned round, and looked back upon the path I had just trodden. To my amazement, may be imagined, when I saw, seated on a low tabular tombstone close to the avenue, a lady with her back towards me. She was wearing a black velvet jacket and short cape, with a narrow border and vivid white. Her head and luxuriant jet black hair were surmounted by a hat of the shape and make that I think used to be called at that time a turban. It was also of black velvet, with a snow-white wing or feather at the right-hand side of it. It may be seen how deliberately and minutely I observed the appearance, when I can thus recall it after more than 40 years. Actuated by a desire to attract the attention of the lady, and induce her to look towards me, I noisily inserted the key in the door, and suddenly opened it with a rusty crack. Turning round to see the effect of my policy, the lady was gone. Poof, vanished. Not yet daunted, I hurried to the place, which was not 10 paces away, and closely searched the stone and the space all around it. But utterly in vain. There were absolutely no traces of the late presence of a human being. I may add that nothing particular or remarkable followed the singular apparition, and that I never heard anything calculated to throw any light on the mystery. Here is the story of a ghost who knew what it wanted, and got it. In the part of County Wicklow, from which my people come, writes a Miss D., there was a family who were not exactly related, but of course of the clan. Many years ago, a young daughter, aged about 20, died. Before her death, she had directed her parents to bury her in a certain graveyard. But for some reason, they didn't do it. And from that hour, she gave them no peace. She appeared to them at all hours, especially when they went to the well for water. So distracted were they that at length they got permission to exhume the remains and have them reinterred in the desired graveyard. This they did by torchlight. A weird scene, truly. I can vouch for the truth of this latter portion, at all events, as some of my known relatives were present. Mr. T.J. Westrop contributes a tale of a ghost of an unusual type, i.e., one which actually did communicate matters of importance to his family. A lady who related many ghost stories to me also told me how, after her father's death, the family could not find some papers or receipts of value. One night, she awoke and heard a sound which she at once recognized as the footsteps of her father, who was lame. The door creaked, and she prayed that she might be able to see him. Her prayer was granted. She saw him distinctly, holding a yellow parchment book tied with tape. F. blank child, said he, this is the book your mother is looking for. It is in the third drawer of the cabinet near the cross door. Tell your mother to be more careful in the future about business papers. Incontinent, he vanished. And she at once awoke her mother, in whose room she was sleeping, who was very angry, and ridiculed the story. But the girl's earnestness at length impressed her. She got up, went to the old cabinet, and at once found the missing book in the third drawer. Here is another tale of an equally useful and obliging ghost. A gentleman, a relative of my own, writes a lady, often received warnings from his dead father of things that were about to happen. Besides the farm on which he lived, he had another some miles away, which adjoined a large area. I was going to say, I don't know what that word is. Once in a great storm, a fir tree was blown down in that area and fell into his field. The wood ranger came to him and told him he might as well cut up the tree and take it away. Accordingly, one day he set out for this purpose, taking with him 2 men and a cart. He got into the fields by a stile, while his men went to a gate. As he approached a gap between the two fields, he saw, standing in it, his father, as plainly as he ever saw him in life, and beckoning him back warningly. Unable to understand this, he still advanced, whereupon his father looked very angry, and his gestures became imperious. This induced him to turn away, so he sent his men home, and left the tree uncut. He subsequently discovered that a plot had been laid by the wood ranger, who coveted his farm, and who hoped to have him dispossessed by accusing him of stealing the tree. A clergyman in the Diocese of Clogher gave a personal experience of a table turning to the present dean of St. Patrick's, who kindly sent the same to the writer. He said, when I was a young man, I met some friends one evening, and we decided to amuse ourselves with the table turning. The local dispensary was vacant at the time, so we said that if the table would work, we should ask who would be appointed as a medical officer. As we sat round it, touching with our hands, it began to knock. We said, "Who are you?" The table spelled out the name of Bishop of the Church of Ireland. We asked, thinking that the answer was absurd, as we knew him to be alive and well. "Are you dead?" The table answered yes. We laughed at this and asked, "Who will be appointed to this dispensary?" The table spelt out the name of a stranger who was not one of the candidates, whereupon we left off, thinking that the whole thing was nonsense. The next morning I saw in the papers that the bishop in question had died that afternoon, about 2 hours before our meeting, and a few days afterwards I saw the name of the stranger as the new dispensary doctor. I got a shock that I determined never to have anything to do with that table turning again. Makes sense. The following extraordinary personal experience is sent by a lady well known to the present writer, but who requests that all names be omitted. Whatever explanation we may give of it, the good faith of the tale is beyond doubt. 2 or 3 months after my father-in-law's death, my husband, myself, and 3 small sons lived in the west of Ireland. As my husband was a young barrister, he had to be absent from home a good deal. My 3 boys slept in my bedroom, the eldest being about 4, the youngest some months. A fire was kept up every night, and with a young child to look after, I was naturally awake more than once during the night. For many nights I believe I distinctly saw my father-in-law sitting by the fireside. This happened not once or twice, but many times. He was passionately fond of his eldest grandson, who lay sleeping calmly in his cot. Being so much alone, probably made me restless, uneasy, though I never felt afraid. I mentioned this strange thing to a friend who had known and liked my father-in-law, and she advised me to have his soul laid, as she termed it, though I was a Protestant and she was a Roman Catholic, as had been my father-in-law. Yet I fell in with her suggestion. She told me to give a coin to the next beggar that came to the house, telling him or her to pray for the rest of Mr. So-and-so's soul. A few days later, a beggar woman and her children came to the door, to whom I gave a coin and stated my desire. To my great surprise, I learned from her manner that such requests were not unusual. Well, she went down on her knees on the steps and prayed with apparent earnestness and devotion that his soul might find repose. Once again he appeared, and seemed to say to me, "Why did you do that, E? To come and sit here was the only comfort I had." Never again did he appear, and strange to say, after a lapse of more than 30 years, I have felt regret at my selfishness in interfering. After his death, as he lay in the house awaiting burial, and I was in a house some 10 miles away, I thought that he came and told me that I would have a hard life, which had turned out only too truly. I was then young and full of life, with every hope of a prosperous future. Of all the strange beliefs to be found in Ireland, that in the black dog is the most widespread. There is hardly a parish in the country but could contribute some tale relative to this spectre, though the majority of these are short and devoid of any interest. There is said to be such a dog just outside the avenue gate of Donahill Rectory, but neither of the compilers have had the good luck to see it. It may be, as some hold, that this animal was originally a cloud or nature myth. At all events, it is now descended to the level of an ordinary haunting. The most circumstantial story that we have met with relative to the black dog is that related as follows by a clergyman of the Church of Ireland, who requests us to refrain from publishing his name. In my childhood, I lived in the country. My father, in addition to his professional duties, sometimes did a little farming in an amateurish sort of way. He did not keep a regular staff of laborers, and consequently, when anything extra had to be done, such as hay cutting or harvesting, he used to employ day laborers to help with the work. At such times, I used to enjoy being in the fields with the men, listening to their conversation. On one occasion, I heard a laborer remark that he had once seen the devil. Of course, I was interested, and asked him to give me his experience. He said he was walking along a certain road, and when he came to a point where there was an entrance to a private place, the spot was well known to me, he saw a black dog sitting on the roadside. At the time, he paid no attention to it, thinking it was an ordinary retriever. But after he had passed on about 200 or 300 yards, he found the dog was beside him, and then he noticed that his eyes were blood red. He stooped down and picked up some stones in order to frighten it away, but though he threw the stones at it, they did not injure it, nor indeed did they seem to have any effect. Suddenly, after a few moments, the dog vanished from his sight. Such was the laborer's tale. After some years, during which time I had forgotten altogether about the man's story, some friends of mine bought the place, at the entrance to which the apparition had been seen. When my friends went to reside there, I was a constant visitor at their house. Soon after their arrival, they began to be troubled by the appearance of a black dog. Though I never saw it myself, it appeared to many members of the family. The avenue leading to the house was a long one, and it was customary for the dog to appear and accompany people for the greater portion of the way. Such an effect had this on my friends that they soon gave up the house and went to live elsewhere. This was a curious corroboration of the laborer's tale. As we have already stated in chapter VII, a distinction must be drawn between the so-called headless coach, which portends to death, and the phantom coach, which appears to be a harmless sort of vehicle. With regard to the latter, we give two tales below, the first of which was sent by a lady whose father was a clergyman and a gold medalist of Trinity College in Dublin. Some years ago, my family lived in County Down. Our house was some way out of a fair-sized manufacturing town, and had a short avenue which ended in a gravel sweep in front of the hall door. One winter's evening, When my father was returning from a sick call, a carriage going at a sharp pace passed him on the avenue. He hurried on, thinking it was some particular friend's, but when he reached the door, no carriage was to be seen. So he concluded it must have gone round to the stables. The servant who answered his ring said that no visitors had been there, and he, feeling certain that the girl had made some mistake, or that someone else had answered the door, came into the drawing room to make further inquiries. No visitors had come, however, though those sitting in the drawing room had also heard the carriage drive up. My father was most positive as to what he'd seen, viz., a closed carriage with lamps lit. And let me say at once that he was a clergyman who was known throughout the whole of the north of Ireland as a most level-headed man, and yet, to the day of his death, he would insist that he met that carriage on our avenue. One day, in July, one of our servants was given leave to go home for the day, but was told she must return by a certain train. For some reason, she did not come by it, but by a much later one, and rushed into the kitchen in a most pertinent frame of mind. "I'm so sorry to be late," she told the cook, "especially as there were visitors. I suppose they stayed to supper, as they were so late going away, for I met the carriage on the avenue." The cook thereupon told her that no one had been at the house, and hinted that she must have seen the ghost carriage, a statement that alarmed her very much, as the story was well known in the town, and car drivers used to whip up their horses as they passed, while the pedestrians refused to go at all except in numbers. We've often heard the carriage, but these are the only two occasions on which I can positively assert that it was seen. The following personal experience of the Phantom Coach was given to the present writer by Mr. Matthias Fitzgerald, coachman, to Miss Cook of Capaw House, County Limerick. He stated that one moonlit night he was driving along the road from Askeaton to Limerick, when he heard coming up behind him the roll of wheels, the clatter of horses' hoofs, and the jingling of the bits. He drew over to his own side to let the carriage pass, but nothing passed. He then looked back, but could see nothing. The road was perfectly bare and empty, though the sounds were perfectly audible. This continued for about a quarter of an hour or so, until he came to a crossroad down one arm of which he had to turn. As he turned off, he heard the phantom carriage dash by rapidly along the straight back road. He stated that other persons had had similar experiences on the same road. Next chapter, I believe it's chapter 10. Nope, it's chapter 9. I learned something off my tarot cards. Hello, Marisa. Hello, everybody. Legendary and ancestral ghosts. Let me have a quick swig of water here. It's dry in here. Hope you guys are enjoying this. I love reading these books. And I can tell you some stories, maybe after we get done, about, about doppelgangers and things like that. I've seen a couple in my lifetime, and there's a lot of legends out of Ireland and Scotland and different places like that. Okay. So, here we go. Whatever explanations may be given of the various stories, let me get in here. Just looking, okay. Whatever explanations may be given in the various stories told in our previous chapters, the facts as stated therein are in almost every case vouched on or vouched for on reliable authority. We may now turn to stories of a different kind, most of which have no evidence of any value in support of the facts, but which have been handed down from generation to generation and deserve our respect, if only for their antiquity. We make no apology for giving them here, for, in addition to the interesting reading they provide, they also serve a useful purpose as a contrast to the authenticated ghost stories. The student of folklore will find parallels to some of them in the tales of other nations. Lord Walter Fitzgerald sends us the following. Garrett Oge, or Gerald the Younger, Fitzgerald, 11th Earl of Kildare, died in London on the 16th November, 1585. His body was brought back to Ireland and interred in St. Brendan's Cathedral in Kildare. He was known as the Wizard Earl, on account of his practicing the black art, whereby he was enabled to transform himself into other shapes, either bird or beast, according to his choice. So notorious was his supernatural power that he became the terror of the countryside. His wife, the Countess, had long wished to see some proof of his skill, and had frequently begged him to transform himself before her. But he had steadily refused to do so, as he said if he did, and she did become afraid, he would be taken from her, and she would never see him again. Still, she persisted, and at last he said he would do as she wished, on condition that she should first of all undergo 3 trials to test her courage. To this she willingly agreed. In the first trial, the river Grease, which flows past the castle walls at a sign from the Earl, overflowed its banks, and flooded the banqueting hall in which the Earl and Countess were sitting. She showed no sign of fear, and at the Earl's command the river receded to its normal course. At the second trial, a huge eel-like monster appeared, which entered by one of the windows, crawled about among the furniture of the banqueting hall, and finally coiled itself round the body of the Countess. Still, she showed no fear, and at a nod from the Earl, the animal uncoiled itself and disappeared. In the third test, an intimate friend of the Countess, long since dead, entered the room, and passing slowly by her, went out at the other end. She showed not the slightest sign of fear, and the Earl felt satisfied that he could place his fate in her keeping. But he again warned her of his danger if she lost her presence of mind while he was in another shape. He then turned himself into a black bird, which flew about the room, and perching on the Countess's shoulder, commenced to sing. Suddenly a black cat appeared from under a chest, and made a spring at the bird. In an agony of fear for his safety, the Countess threw up her arms to protect it, and swooned away. When she came to, she was alone. The bird and the cat had disappeared, and she never saw the Earl again. It is said that he and his knights lie in an enchanted sleep, with their horses beside them, in a cave under the rath of the hill of Mulgmast, which stands, as the crow flies, 5 miles to the north of Kilkea Castle. Once in 7 years they are allowed to issue forth. They gallop round the Curragh, thence across country to Kilkea Castle, where they re-enter the haunted wing, and then return to the rath of Mulgmast. The Earl is easily recognized, as he is mounted on a white charger with silver shoes. When these shoes are worn out, the enchantment will be broken, and he will issue forth, drive the foes of Ireland from the land, and reign for a 7 times 7 number of years over the vast estates of his ancestors. Shortly before 98, he was seen on the Curragh by a blacksmith who was crossing it in a donkey cart from Athgarriven to Kildare. A fairy blast overtook him, and he had time to say, "Godspeed, ye gentlemen," to the invisible good people. When he heard the horses galloping up behind him, pulling to one side of the road, he looked back and was terrified at seeing a troop of knights, fully armed, led by one on a white horse. The leader halted his men, and riding up to the blacksmith, asked him to examine his shoes. Almost helpless from fear, he stumbled out of the donkey cart and looked at each shoe, which was of silver, and then informed the knight that all the nails were sound. The knight thanked him, rejoined his troop, and galloped off. The blacksmith, in a half-dazed state, hastened on to Kildare, where he entered a public house, ordered a noggin of whiskey, and drank it neat. When he had thoroughly come to himself, he told the men that were present what had happened to him on the Curragh. One old man, who had listened to him, said, by the Morshall man, you are after seeing Gerard Urla." This fully explained the mystery. Gerard Urla, or Earl Gerald, is the name by which the Wizard Earl is known by the peasantry. One other legend is told in connection with the Wizard Earl, of a considerably later date. It is said that a farmer was returning from a fair in Athley late one evening in the direction of Ballantory. When passing within a view of the rath of Mulgmast, he was astonished to see a bright light apparently issuing from it. Dismounting from his car, he went to investigate. On approaching the raft, he noticed that the light was proceeding from a cave in which were sleeping several men in armor, with their horses beside them. He cautiously crept up to the entrance, and seeing that neither man nor beast stirred, he grew bolder and entered the chamber. He then examined the saddlery of the horses and the armor of the men, and, plucking up courage, began slowly to draw a sword from his sheath. And as he did so, the owner's head began to rise, and he heard a voice in Irish say, "It's the Is the time yet come?" In terror, the farmer, as he shoved the sword back, replied, "It is not your honor," and then it's not your honor, and then fled from the place. It is said that if the farmer had only completely unsheathed the sword, the enchantment would have been broken, and the earl would have come to his own again. In 1642, Walstown Castle, the seat of the Wall family in County Cork, was burnt down by the Cromwellian troops, and Colonel Wall, the head of the family, was captured and imprisoned in Cork jail, where he died. One of the defenders during the siege was a man named Henry Bennett, who was killed while fighting. His ghost was often seen about the place for years after his death. His dress was of a light color, and he wore a white hat. While in his hand, he carried a pole which he used to place across the road near the castle to stop travelers on a polite request to remove the pole. He would withdraw it and laughed heartily. A caretaker in the place named Philip Coghlan used frequently to be visited by his apparition. He came generally about supper time, and while Coghlan and his wife were seated at table, he would shove the pole through the window. Coghlan would beg him to go away and not interfere with the poor, hard-worked man. The pole would then be withdrawn, with a hearty laugh from the ghost. In the parish church of Andreta, near Cookstown, is a marble monument and inscription in memory of Thomas Meredith, D.D., who had been a Fellow of Trinity College, Dublin, and for 6 years rector of the parish. He died, according to the words of the inscriptions, on 2nd May 1819, as a result of a sudden and awful visitation. A local legend explains this visitation by stating that a ghost haunted the rectory, the visits of which had caused his family and servants to leave the house. The rector had tried to shoot it, but failed. Then he was told to use a silver bullet. He did so, and next morning was found dead at his hall door, while a hideous object like a devil made horrid noises out of any window the servant man approached. This man was advised by some Roman Catholic neighbors to get the priest, who would lay the thing. The priest arrived, and with the help of a jar of whiskey, the ghost became quite civil, till the last glass in the jar, which the priest was about to empty out for himself, whereupon the ghost or devil made himself as thin and long as the lone eagle eel, and slipped himself into the jar to get the last drops. But the priest put the cork in its place and hammered it in, and, making the sign of the cross on it, he had the evil thing secured. It was buried in the cellar of the rectory, where on some nights it could still be heard calling to be let out. Interesting. A story of a phantom rat. Oh yeah, I know. Just for the record, I don't like rats. Never have. So anything that has to do with a rat kind of creeps me out. Okay. So a story of a phantom rat, which comes from Limerick, is only one of many which show the popular Irish belief in hauntings by various animals. Many years ago, legend runs, a young man was making frantic and unacceptable love to a girl. At last, one day, when he was following her into the street, she turned on him and, pointing to a rat, which some boys had just killed, said, "I'd as soon marry that rat as you." He took her cruel words so much to heart that he pined away and died. After his death, the girl was haunted at night by a rat, and in spite of the constant watch of her mother and sisters, she was more than once bitten. The priest was called in and could do nothing, so she determined to emigrate. A coasting vessel was about to start for Queenstown, and her friends, collecting what money they could, managed to get her on board. The ship had just cast off from the quay when shouts and screams were heard up the street. The crowd scattered, and a huge rat with fiery eyes galloped down to the quay. It sat upon the edge screaming hate, sprang off, and did not reappear. After that, we're told, the girl was never again haunted. The legend of the Tirawali family relates how a former Lord Tirawali, who was a very wild and reckless man, was taken from this world. One evening, it is said, just as the nobleman was preparing for a night's carouse, a carriage drove up to his door. A stranger asked to see him, and, after a long private conversation, drove away as mysteriously as he had come. Whatever words had passed, they had a wonderful effect on the gay lord, for his ways were immediately changed, and he lived the life of a reformed man. As time went on, the effect of whatever awful warning the mysterious visitor had given him wore off, and he began to live a life even more wild and reckless than before. On the anniversary of the visit, he was anxious and gloomy, but he tried to make light of it. The day passed, and at night there was a high revelry in the banqueting hall. Outside it was wet and stormy, when just before midnight the sound of wheels was heard in the courtyard. All the riot stopped. The servants opened the door in fear and trembling. Outside stood a huge dark coach with 4 black horses. The fearful guest entered and beckoned to Lord Trelawney, who followed him to a room off the hall. The friends, sobered by fear, saw through the door the stranger drawing a ship on the wall. The piece of wall then detached itself, and the ship grew solid. The stranger climbed into it, and Lord Tyrrelly followed without a struggle. The vessel then sailed away. I know I mispronounced the guy's name twice. Into the night, and neither it nor its occupants were ever seen again. The above tale is a good example of how a legend will rise superior to ordinary humdrum facts of life. For it strikes us at once that the gloomy spectre went to unnecessary trouble in constructing a ship, even though the task proved so simple to his gifted hands. But the coach was at the door, and surely it would have been less troublesome to have used it. A strange legend is told of a house in the Boyne Valley. It is said that the occupant of the guest chamber was always weakened on the first night of his visit. Then he would see a pale light and the shadow of a skeleton climbing the wall like a huge spider. It used to crawl out onto the ceiling, and when it reached the middle, would materialize into an apparent bones, holding on by its hands and feet. It would break in pieces, and first the skull, and then the other bones would fall on the floor. One person had the courage to get up and try to seize the bone, but his hand passed through to the carpet, though the heap was visible for a few seconds. The following story can hardly be called legendary, though it may certainly be termed ancestral. The writer's name is not given, but he is described as a rector and rural dean in the late established Church of Ireland, and a justice of the peace for 2 counties. It has this added interest that it was told to Queen Victoria by the Marchioness of Ely. Loftus Hall in County Wexford was built on the site of a stronghold erected by Raymond, one of the Strongbow's followers. His descendants forfeited it in 1641, and the property subsequently fell into the hands of the Loftus family, one of whom built a house and another building. About the middle of the 18th century, there lived at Loftus Hall, Charles Tottenham, a member of the Irish Parliament, known to fame as Tottenham and his boots. Owing to his historic ride to the Irish capital, in order to give the casting vote an emotion which saved £80,000 to the Irish Treasury. I'm thinking it's pounds. The second son, Charles Tottenham, had 2 daughters, Elizabeth and Anne, to the latter of whom our story relates. He came to live at Loftus Hall, the old baronial residences of the family, with his second wife and the 2 above-mentioned daughters of his first wife. Loftus Hall was an old rambling mansion, with no pretense to beauty, passages that led nowhere, large dreary rooms, small closets, various unnecessary nooks and crannies, paneled or wainscoted walls, and a tapestry chamber. He resided at the time my story commences Here, I'm sorry. Here resided at the time my story commences Charles Tottenham, his second wife, and his daughter, Anne Elizabeth, his second daughter, having been married. The father was a cold, austere man. The stepmother was the stepmother, such as that unamiable relation is generally represented to be. Wondered how great the state of lonely solitude and depression of mind of poor Anne must have been in such a place, without neighbors of any home, or any home sympathy, may easily have been imagined. One wet and stormy night, as they sat in the large drawing room, they were startled by a loud knocking at the outer gate, a most surprising and unusual occurrence. Presently, the servant announced that a young gentleman on horseback was there requesting lodging and shelter. He had lost his way, his horse was knocked up, and he had been guided by the only light which he had seen. The stranger was admitted and refreshed, and proved himself to be an agreeable companion, and a finished gentleman, far too agreeable for the lone scion of the house of Tottenham. For a sad and mournful tale follows, and one whose strange results continued almost to the present day. Much mystery has involved the story at the present point, and in the truth, the matter was left in such silence and obscurity that, but for the acts of her for whom the chief suffered through several generations, nothing would now be known. The fact, I believe, which was not unnatural under the circumstances, that this lonely girl formed a strong attachment to this gallant youth chance had brought to her door, which was warmly returned. The father, as was stern by nature, was obdurate, and the wife no solace to her, as she was a stepmother. It is only an instance of the refrain of the old ballad. He loved and he rode away. He had youth and friends and stirring scenes, and soon forgot his passing attachment. Poor Anne's reason gave way. The fact is but too true. She became a confirmed maniac, and had to be confined for the rest of her life in the tapestry chamber before mentioned, and in which she died. A strange legend was at once invented to account for this calamity. It tells how the horseman proved such an agreeable acquisition that he was invited to remain some days, and made himself quite at home. And as they were now 4 in number, which was proposed in the evenings, the stranger, however, with Anne as his partner, invariably won every point. The old couple never had the smallest success. One night, when poor Anne was in great delight at winning so constantly, she dropped a ring on the floor, and, suddenly diving under the table to recover it, was terrified to see that her agreeable partner had an unmistakably cloven foot. Whoa! Her screams made him aware of her discovery, and he at once vanished in a thunderclap, leaving a brimstone smell behind him. The poor girl never recovered from the shock, lapsed from one fit into another, and was carried to the tapestry room, for which she never came forth alive. This story of his satanic majesty got abroad, and many tales are told of how he continued to visit and disturb the house. The noises, the apparitions, and disturbances were innumerable, and greatly distressed old Charles Tottenham, his wife, and servants. It is said that they finally determined to call in the services of their parish priest, a Father Broaders, who, armed with all the exorcisms of the church, succeeded in confining the operation of the evil spirit to one room, the tapestry room. Here, then, we have traced, from the day of the unhappy girl's misfortune, that the house was disturbed by something supernatural, and that the family sought the aid of a parish priest to abate it, and further, that the tapestry room was the scene of this visitation. But the matter was kept dark. All reference to poor Anne was avoided, and the belief allowed to go abroad that it was Satan himself who disturbed the peace of the family. Her parents were ready to turn aside the keen edge of observation from her fate, preferring rather that it should be believed that they were haunted by the devil, so that the story of her wrongs should sink into oblivion, and be classed as an old wives' tale of horrors and hooves. The harsh father and stepmother have long gone to the place appointed for all living, The Loftus branch of the family are in possession of the hall. Yet, poor Anne has kept her tapestry chamber by nearly the same means which compelled her parents to call in the aid of the parish priest so long ago. But to my tale, about the end of the last century, my father was invited by Mrs. Tottenham to meet a large party at the hall. He rode, as was then the custom in Ireland, with his pistols in his holsters. On arriving, he found the house full, and Mrs. Tottenham apologized to him for being obliged to assign him to the tapestry chamber for the night, which, however, he gladly accepted, never having heard any of the stories connected with it. However, he had scarcely covered himself in the bed when suddenly something heavy leaped upon it, growling like a dog. The curtains were torn back, and the clothes stripped from the bed. Supposing that some of his companions were playing tricks, he called out that he would shoot them, and seizing a pistol, he fired up the chimney, lest he should wound any of them. He then struck a light and searched the room diligently, but found no sign or mark of anyone, and the door locked as he left it, on retiring to the rest. Next day, he informed his hosts how he had been annoyed, but they could only say that they would not have put him in that room if they had had any other to offer him. Years passed on. When the Marquis of Ely went to the hall to spend some time there, his valet was put to sleep in the tapestry chamber. In the middle of the night, the whole family was aroused by his dreadful roars and screams, and he was found lying in another room in mortal terror. After some time, he told them that soon after he had laid himself down in bed, he was startled by the rattling of the curtains as they were torn back, and looking up, he saw a tall lady by the bedside dressed in a stiff brocaded silk, whereupon he rushed out of the room, screaming with terror. Years afterwards, I was brought by my father with the rest of the family to the hall for the summer bathing. Attracted by the quaint look of the tapestry room, I at once chose it for my bedroom, being utterly ignorant of the stories connected with it. For some little time, nothing out of the way happened. One night, however, I sat up much later than usual to finish an article in a magazine I was reading. The full moon was shining clearly in through the two large windows, making all as clear as day. I was just about to get into bed, and, happening to glance towards the door, to my great surprise, I saw it open quickly and noiselessly, and as quickly and noiselessly shut again, while the tall figure of a lady in a stiff dress passed slowly through the room to one of the curious closets already mentioned, which was in the opposite corner. I rubbed my eyes. Every possible explanation but the true one occurred to my mind, for the idea of a ghost did not for a moment enter my head. I quickly reasoned myself into a sound sleep and forgot about the matter. The next night, again, I sat up late in my bedroom, preparing a gun and ammunition to go and shoot seabirds early next morning, when the door opened again, and shut in the same noiseless manner, and the same tall lady proceeded to cross the room quietly and deliberately as before towards the closet. I instantly rushed at her, and threw my right arm around her, exclaiming, "Ha! I have you now!" To my utter astonishment, my arm passed through her, and came with a thud against the bedpost, at which spot she then was. The figure quickened its pace, and, as it passed the skirt of its dress, lapped against the curtain, and I marked distinctly the pattern of her gown, a stiff brocaded silk. The ghostly solution of the problem did not yet enter my mind. However, I told the story at breakfast next morning. My father, who had himself suffered from the lady's visit so long before, never said a word, and it passed as some folly of mine. So slight was the impression it made on me at the time that, though I slept many a night after in that room, I never thought of watching or looking out for anything. Years later, I was again a guest at the hall. The Marquis of Ely and his family, with a large retinue of servants, filled the house to overflowing. As I passed the housekeeper's room, I heard the valet say, "What? I to sleep in that tapestry chamber? Never. I will never leave my lord's service before I sleep there. Oh, I'm sorry. I will leave my lord's service before I sleep there." At once my former experience in that room flashed upon my mind. I had never thought of it during the interval, and was still utterly ignorant of Anne Tottenham. So when the housekeeper was gone, I spoke to the valet and said, "Tell me why you will not sleep in that room, as I have a particular reason for asking." He said, "Is it possible that you do not know that the Miss Tottenham passes through that room every night, and, dressed in a stiff flowered silk dress, enters a closet in the corner?" I replied that I had never heard of a word of her until now, but that I had, a few years before, twice seen a figure exactly like what he had described, and passed my arm through her body. "Yes," said he, "that was Miss Tottenham, and, as is well known, she was confined mad in that room, and died there, and, they say, was buried in that closet." Time wore on, and another generation arose, another owner possessed the property, the grandson of my friend. In the year 1805 blank, he, being then a child, came with his mother, the Marchioness of Ely, and his tutor, the Reverend Charles Dale, to the hall for the bathing season. Mr. Dale was no imaginative person. A solid, steady, highly educated English clergyman, who had never even heard the name of Miss Tottenham, the tapestry room, was his bedchamber. One day in the late autumn of that year, I received a letter from the uncle of the Marquis, saying, "Do tell me what it was you saw long ago in that room." For something strange must have happened to the Reverend Charles Dale, as he came to breakfast quite mystified. Something very strange must have occurred, but he won't tell us. Seems quite nervous, and in short, is determined to give up his tutorship and return to England. Every year, something mysterious has happened just to any person who slept in that room, but they always kept it close. Mr. D., a Wexford gentleman, slept there a short while ago. He had a splendid dressing case fitted with gold and silver articles, which he left carefully locked on his table at night. In the morning he found the whole of his contents scattered about the room. Upon hearing this, I determined to write to the Reverend Charles Dale, then incumbent of a parish near Dover, telling him what had occurred to myself in that room, and that the evidence of supernatural appearances there were so strong and continued for several generations that I was anxious to put them together, and I would consider it a great favor if he would tell me if anything had happened to him in that room, and of what nature. He then, for the first time, mentioned the matter, and from his letter now before me, I make the following extracts. Let me have some water real quick, guys. Spooky. Okay. For 3 weeks, I experienced no inconvenience from the lady, but one night, just before we were about to leave, I had sat up very late. It was just 1 o'clock when I retired to my bedroom, a very beautiful moonlit night. I locked my door and sat and saw that the shutters were properly fastened, as I did every night. I had not lain myself down more than about 5 minutes before something jumped on the bed, making a growling noise. The bedclothes were pulled off, though I strongly resisted the pull. I immediately sprang up out of bed, lighted my candle, and looked into the closet and under the bed, but saw nothing. Mr. Dale goes on to say that he endeavored to account for it in some such way as I had formerly done, having never, up to that time, heard one word of the lady and her doings in that room. He adds, "I did not see the lady or hear any noise but the growling." Here, then, is the written testimony of a beneficed English clergyman occupying the responsible position of tutor to the young Marquis of Ely, a most sober-minded and unimpressible man. He repeats in 1867 almost the very words of my father when detailing his experience in that room in 1790. A man whose existence he had never been cognizant, and therefore utterly ignorant of Miss Tottenham's doings in that room nearly 80 years before. In the autumn of 1868, I was again in the locality at Dunmore, on the opposite side of the Waterford estuary. I went across to see the old place, and what alterations Miss Tottenham had forced the proprietors to make in the tapestry chamber. I found that the closet to which the poor lady had always vanished was taken away, the room enlarged, and 2 additional windows put in. The old tapestry had gone, and a billiard table occupied the side of poor Anne's bed. I took the old housekeeper aside and asked her to tell me how Miss Tottenham bore these changes in her apartment. She looked quite frightened and most anxious to avoid the question, but at length hurriedly replied, "Oh, Master George, don't talk about her. Last night she made a horrid noise, knocking the billiard balls about." I have thus traced, with strict accuracy, this most real and true tale, from the days of Tottenham and his boots to those of his great-grandson, great-grandson. Loftus Hall has since been wholly rebuilt, but I have not heard whether poor Anne Tottenham has condescended to visit or is wholly banished at last. Well, chapter 10 is the last chapter. Mistaken identity and conclusion. It is 6:07, so I'm going to stop. So we'll continue next week with the last chapter, and then we'll probably start another book, after this one's done. Let me go ahead and flag this down today, okay? All right, we're going to shut it down. I'll come back to our page. So, yeah. So we'll finish that last chapter next week. And I know it's Easter, so people are going to be busy. So maybe, I don't know, we should hold off for a week or just go ahead and do it. I don't know. Depends what you guys want to do. What do you guys want to do? You want to finish the book next week? Or do we hold off for a couple days? Do we hold off? All right, so we'll finish it next week. I saw it. Okay, so, yeah, so we'll go ahead and finish it next week, and then we'll start another book. Okay, I'll try and find something else to read. So that's it. It's interesting stories. And, it's funny because you guys, Time Life Books, I don't even know if they produce books anymore. Time Life Books, they have a whole bunch of stuff on the Old West and the 49ers. I have a whole bunch of them here. Well, the only two that my dad got me when I was a kid, which was interesting, was they had a Supernatural series. And it was interesting because it had legends not only from the U.S., but it had legends from from Ireland and England and stuff. And a lot of what he's talking about in here was in that book. And one that really, really bothered me as a kid was like you would be standing in a mirror, and if you saw yourself looking over your shoulder, that was your doppelganger, but that meant death. If you happen to look in the mirror, then you were looking over your own shoulder into the mirror. And it's legends like that were in there. And to this day, somewhere in here in my library, I still have that particular book to help. And their books have helped immensely. I know doing stuff up here in the California Gold Country, I learned about I learned about all kinds of ghosts and stuff that people, Tommy knockers and things like that people were in contact with up here. But I mean, there's a lot of doppelganger stories. I mean, I swear I was on a trip to England with my family, and we were at the airport, and I swear I saw my doppelganger in one of the other aisles of the airport. One of the other gates. It looks just like me. I had a friend of mine that we used to work together up here in Northern California, and one night I was out, and I don't know if my producer was with me or not. I can't remember, but I swear up and down that my other friend was there. That I saw her walking on the street there, but she was home. So I mean, it does happen with doppelgangers. It does happen. Okay. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up tonight. It was fun. It was a fun read. Confusing at times the way it was written with the little D's and all that, but it was pretty fun. I spent yesterday working on my front lawn, which turned out pretty good. You know what I don't like? I don't like those the county green receptacles, because once they fill, you can't put anything else in there. So now I'm stuck. I got to wait. Now I can't do any more work on my lawn until Wednesday. When the garbage guys come. So I'm kind of off on that, so I got other things going on. I did buy Easter egg decoration. I did buy Easter egg stuff today. I always make cosmic eggs, so we'll be doing that live next Saturday with you guys. How's that sound? We're gonna do it. My producer and I are gonna do cosmic eggs with you guys. And I was hoping to do a gingerbread house, but didn't quite get to it. Didn't have the time this week because the stuff with my car. But I'll make it up to you, I promise. Maybe we'll do a 4th of July gingerbread house or something to celebrate. We could even do a May Day one, with little flowers on it and stuff. I don't know. Kind of like a Tournament of Roses version of a gingerbread house. Okay, so anyway, just to give you guys an update, tomorrow I will be back at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, right here. Not so much for you guys. because I have radio shows scheduled every day next week with Nancy Matz bringing up the rear. Got some great guests coming up. I'm real excited about it. We've got tomorrow. We're going to be looking at haunted toys. That'll be at 5:30 p.m. Pacific. Haunted toys. Tuesday, we'll have the Reverend. Yeah, we'll have the Reverend Bill Bean. Tomorrow's 14th. Trying to remember this. Tuesday, we're going to have a young lady who was a tour guide over at the Queen Mary, and she's going to be talking to us Tuesday night. That's another 5:30 p.m. On Wednesday, the show is going to be at 1:30 p.m. Pacific. Reverend Bill Bean is going to be with us. He's going to be talking about some of his dark cases and the exorcisms and stuff that he's performed. So he's going to be with us. Thursday, that's a surprise. Okay, this gentleman I have on can be controversial at times, but he has some really good, cool stuff to say. And then Friday, of course, Nancy Matz is going to be bringing up the rear. That will be at 5:30 p.m. Pacific. Thursday is at 5:30 p.m. Pacific. The only one that's going to be early is the 1:30 p.m. on Wednesday. Okay, so be ready, and I'm going to get those teasers out on Facebook and YouTube and all that, and Instagram, so people know the shows are coming. But again, tomorrow 5 p.m. Pacific, or 5:30 p.m. Pacific, we will be talking about haunted toys. And then, of course, at around 7:15, 7:30 p.m. Pacific tomorrow, we'll be back over on TikTok, doing free tarot card readings and things like that. So be on the lookout. We're going to have a full week of California Haunts Radio. And the thing is with California Haunts Radio, guys, you have to go to our YouTube site to sign up, to subscribe. Okay, because that's where they're going to be seen. I don't have the capability to do them on TikTok yet. I'm working on getting that capability. But in the meantime, you can come on over to see us on YouTube, and you can see those shows live. Okay? All right, guys. Love you. It's good to see you all. And first off, I'm going to say goodnight to this app, so let me shut this guy down over here. And that's going. And I'm going to say goodbye to TikTok. Thank you so much for coming today. And for you guys that won't be visiting me this week, see you next week for the reading of the ghost stories. But we'll see you tomorrow either at 5:30 p.m. Pacific to talk about haunted toys, or around 7:15, 7:30 tomorrow to do free tarot card readings. Thank you, everybody. Good night, everyone. Thank you. Have a great evening, okay? See you tomorrow. Okay, everybody, here we go. And like I said, I'll be back tomorrow, 5:30 p.m. Pacific for haunted toys. We'll be talking haunted toys. All right, everyone, have a great rest of your Sunday, and I hope you sleep well. Bye. Yeah, trigger. Oh, there we go.